Good morning and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment of the City of Ottawa under the Planning Act. This video conference is also live streaming on YouTube. With me are my fellow panel members, Jocelyn Chandler, Stephen Lewis, Terrence Otto, and Martin Vervoort. My name is Fabien Poulin, and I will be chairing this hearing today. The procedure for this hearing will be as follows. Listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Committee members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support or in opposition to each of the applications. They will hear oral submissions from any interested parties. Notice regarding minor variance applications, notwithstanding pre-consultation with city staff, it is the responsibility of the applicant to identify all required variances accurately on the application to one, add a new variance or increase the extent of the variance requested. It must be given in accordance with the Planning Act and may require the application to be recirculated for the next hearing date at a cost to the applicant at the prescribed fee. If an applicant amends their plans with no impact to the variances or to reduce the variances requested, recirculation may not be required. Appealing a decision of the committee. Decisions of the Committee of Adjustment may be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal for a fee within 20 days of the date of the written decision. Only the applicant, the minister on the specified, or a specified person, or a public body that has an interest in the matter may appeal the decision. A specified person does not include any individual or community association. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. This declaration must be on file today before we can hear the application. Without it, I may have to adjourn the application or administer an oath if necessary. Can the coordinator confirm that we have received the statutory declarations?
We have not received any statutory declarations, Chair.
I will then administer the oath to all applicants. The committee may ask for a brief presentation of the application, followed by questions from members and submissions from the public. Please address your comments to the chair, starting with your name and spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. The committee limits presentations to 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the discretion of the chair. And before we begin, we have one item to address today. Does any member present need to declare an interest in any of the applications that are before us today or that are on the agenda of another committee panel? I have a conflict of interest to declare on item number 2. Therefore, that item will be put to the last, and it will be dealt with at that time once I leave. We will now hear applications scheduled for this hearing, and we'll deal firstly with any applications that may be adjourned. I think there are 3 applications looking to be adjourned. I'll first deal with number 4. This one has to do with 3 Rock Forest. And yeah, applicant there is Mr. Ryan Poulton. Or that's the agent for 3 Rock Forest Road. Mr. Poulton, are you available?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, so we are requesting an adjournment, sine die. Previously, this application was adjourned. We were hoping we'd have more clarity on when the city's rural severance policies would be updated. We have more information, but we don't have certainty. So at this point, we'd like to request the applications be adjourned sine die.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Mr. Harrigan to comment on it. Are you in agreement with adjourning this application?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we are.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the panel to adjourn this application sine die. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is adjourned. Thank you very much, Mr. Poulton.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. We'll move on to application number 1. Application number 1 has to do with 930 Smith Road. Mr. Boisvert, John Paul Boisvert, are you available, sir? You're on mute, Mr. Boulevard. There you go. I see you.
Unmute. Sorry, this is my first time using Zoom.
That's okay. Not a worry. There's an
Good morning,
adjournment
Mr. Chair.
request here by planning. Are you in agreement with that adjournment request?
No, I would appreciate if we can try and go through. Can ask you not to adjourn. We ask you to trust, the engineering that I've provided. If it basically the big one with what he was requesting was to see if there was more than 7 lots, and there's a simple nitrate calculation that shows the 7 lots. So I think under a quick look at that, we can then he could look at that, because typically the process is for hydro G that it could be reviewed after. So I would like to proceed. Yeah, I would appreciate it.
Okay, Mr. Graham, do you have any comments on behalf of the city?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've requested the adjournment because we did not receive the hydrogen report with enough time to review it. We received it late last week. And the applicant is correct. Typically, we will accept these as a condition of approval and review them afterwards. But in this case, we don't think it's prudent to tentatively approve this file in advance of this because it's creating 7 new lots on development reserve zone. The approval of this application without knowledge of the Hydro G report would potentially preclude some of these lots from being serviced. And so in this zone, it's set out to protect development in the future. And without knowing the full scope of the Hydro G report in advance, we don't think it's wise to approve it without having fully reviewed the report.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the panel if they have any comments with respect to this adjournment. Ms. Chandler?
So I have a question and then a comment. What is planning's position? Is it only with respect to the Hydro G? You are comfortable with 7 lots going through by severance rather than by subdivision? It meets the tests from your perspective?
We do have concerns otherwise outside of the Hydro G. We do think that from a planning perspective, some of the lots are are irregularly shaped and not necessarily the best layout. And yeah, that is our position, that it's not only the Hydro G, but also that we would otherwise have concerns with this application.
Okay, but specifically with respect to this proceeding, the planning department is comfortable with this proceeding as severances as opposed to through a plan of subdivision.
With the conditions that we've imposed, and as long as we can support the number of lots after fully reviewing the Hydro G. So some of the planning opinion is based on the review of the Hydro G and whether or not this is the most, or whether the number of lots that the Hydro G says it can support is 7, or if it's whichever number that comes out to be from the Hydro G report. So the planning opinion rests upon the Hydro G review.
Okay, so my comment is to the applicant. Hydro G reports are not so hard to get through for 1 or 2 severances. This is going to be tested under the City of Ottawa's Hydro G guidelines as well as the provincial ones. And I can tell you that that is not a straightforward exercise. I think that you're taking a very big risk proceeding with severances, with that being a condition. And I think you're taking a little bit of a risk with this committee. If we turn it down, that's a very expensive loss in terms of application fees. I think you would be my advice would be to seriously consider adjourning this and get that Hydro G sorted first. I'm concerned for your, it's your risk. I think it's a big one.
Okay. I mean, I hear you. So I would like to consider it then. If we did do an adjournment, when would that possibly be adjourned to? I also have a financial loss that I would take on.
I understand.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars if I don't get this going with it's more than just the 10 or 15,000 with this. I could lose hundreds of thousands if I don't get this going. So I also have to take that into consideration.
Yeah, and so my advice comes from the fact that I practice as a planner in Ottawa and I deal with them on hydro Gs on a regular basis.
Okay. When would an adjournment be possible if I were to adjourn?
How quickly can you get the hydro G done?
It's already done. I put it in Tuesday last week.
Oh, okay. Mr. Graham, how long? So if it's already in, are you able to address this pretty quickly? Because we have, when's our next hearing date, Mr. Coordinator? Or Madam Coordinator? It's usually the third week in April. So 1, 2, 3, the 19th.
Yeah.
Yes, Ms. Chandler?
You need to hear from Mr. Graham if he's been given any feedback on how long the reviewers will be able,
Right.
how long it'll take them to get to it.
Mr. Graham?
Yes, we did receive the report, and we would be able to review it for the upcoming hearing on April 19th.
Okay. You good with that, Mr. Bover?
I'm good with that.
Okay, so I'd like to ask the panel to adjourn this application to April the 19th. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is adjourned to the 19th of April, sir. Thank you.
Yep.
I'd like to go to application number 6, another adjournment request. This application has to do with 1980 Phelan Road. I'm looking for Mike McGill. Are you available, sir? Mike McGill? I see a Mary McGill.
Hello, good morning. I'm Tess Gilchrist. I'm a planner with IBI Group, and I'm here on behalf of Mary and Mike McGill for 1980 Phelan Road.
Great. So there's an adjournment request here for this application. Are you in agreement with that adjournment request?
Through you, Mr. Chair, respectfully, we would like to proceed with the applications today if possible. We were adjourned at the last meeting and there has been some correspondence with staff. We were unable to meet, but I think that we are in a position to proceed today, and I do have a brief presentation prepared for the committee as well.
Okay. I'd like to ask the planning department, Mr. Harrigan, if you've got some comments to make with respect to this adjournment request.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department still has significant concerns with this application, primarily that it fails to meet the provincial policy statement along regarding new farm holdings. Right now, the PPS requires that they demonstrate that the lots are of a similar size to that within the agricultural community area, as well as demonstrate the lot that's being created is suitable for flexibility for long-term farming practices. And right now, we just haven't seen any additional comments or discussion or rationale to this, besides a few statements without any supporting discussion.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask the panel if they have any comments. Mr. Vervoort.
I think it's up to the applicant if they want to proceed, and I'm prepared to hear the matter today. I don't think it's adjourning it further is going to advance the party's position, so I'm in favor of proceeding.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, it seems to be going nowhere. Let's deal with this today. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Otto.
I'm prepared to deal with it today.
Okay. And Ms. Chandler.
I'm good to go.
Okay, so we'll hear your application in order. Thank you very much, Ms. Gilchrist.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll proceed to we'll move on to application number 3. This application has to do with 8515 Mitch Owens Road. Looking for Stuart Mackey. Mr. Mackey. Mr. Mackey, are you available? Okay, we'll stand this one down for a moment or two and see if Mr. Mackey will be joining us.
Mr. Chair, he is on the call. He's on
Okay.
the name Stewart.
Under the name Stewart. Okay.
Hello,
Good morning.
how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. I would like to administer an oath concerning the sign posting on your property. Can you take that oath today?
Yes,
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
I swear.
Thank you. I note for the panel that planning does not have any concerns and conservation partners do not object. I'd first like to ask them if they have any comments. Mr. Teef, do you have any comments on behalf of the city?
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have no comments or concerns.
Okay. And I note again, our conservation partners don't have any objections. I'd like to ask the conservation partners if they have any comments to make.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We don't have any concerns as noted. There is a floodplain that has been mapped on the severed portion of the property, and that is a regulated feature, but that doesn't impact this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mackey, I have, there are 3 conditions on this application. Should we approve that today? Are you familiar with those applications or those conditions?
I believe so, yes.
And do you agree with them?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I now like to ask the panel for approval of this application with all 3 requested conditions. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Mackey. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to application number 5. Application number 5 has to do with 3220A March Road. I'm looking for Allison Clark. Ms. Clark, are you available? I see you now.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Clark. I would like to administer an oath concerning the sign posting for the property. Can you take that oath this morning?
I can.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, as instructed, and was clearly visible and legible during that time. Do you swear?
I do.
Thank you. Okay, so I would like to do a little bit of housekeeping with respect to the planning report. Their frontage on March Road is now 21 meters, not 60 meters. Is that correct, Ms. Clark?
Yes.
And there is a 61 meters instead of 199 meters on Howie Road. Is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So we've got, would you like to give us a brief description of your application today, ma'am?
Yeah, sure. I don't have too much of a formal presentation, but I can give you a quick overview. As you said, my name is Allison Clark, and I'm representing the owner of 3220A March Road. The owners wish to sever their property to create a residential lot fronting onto Abbey Wood Court. This severed lot would be 0.81 hectares and conforms to the zoning on the property today. The residual lot will be larger than the required 10 hectares as well at 11.8. That's really it for the brief presentation. As I said, thank you to everyone, Jack Graham particularly for his help in reviewing this file, and happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Okay, thank you. There are 8 conditions should this application be approved today. Are you familiar with those conditions, Ms. Clark?
We are, yes.
And do you agree with them?
We do.
Great, thank you very much. I'd like to ask Mr. Graham now to respond to this application. Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Chair. As noted in the report, the department is objecting on the basis of the official plan rural severance policy. Other than the policy error, the planning department has no concerns with the application.
Thank you. Is this policy error the one we've been dealing with regularly because the wording has not been corrected?
Yes, Chair, it's the same policy that's come up several times.
Great. Thank you very much. I note that the conservation partners do not object. Does the conservation want to make, partners would like to make a comment?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll just make a comment. The Conservation Authority notes that portions of the subject property are regulated due to the presence of wetlands and watercourses. The subject retained lands contain all the natural features, and the severed lands do not have any of the features. Any works within the regulated area will require a permit from MVCA. We would also like to note that staff have been identified some unauthorized works on the retained lands. We're currently investigating that, and however, the outcome of the resolution will not have no impact to the severed lands.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask the panel for their comments. Mr. Otto, do you have any comments to make, sir?
No comments. I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
Yeah, I support the application, deal with the rural policy severance thing as we usually do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Revort?
Just a quick question for Mr. Graham. Do we have a timeline or an estimated timeline for correcting the official plan error?
Through you, Chair, it's estimated, or it's forthcoming in the second quarter of this year, that an official plan amendment will be coming through from the.
Thank you. I'm in favor of the application. I think we know that the correction will be made, and this will allow the applicant to move forward and start satisfying the conditions. So I'm supporting the application.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Chandler?
I don't have any concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to ask the panel to approve this application with all 8 conditions. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Ms. Clark. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to application number 6. Application number 6 has to do with 1980 Phelan Road. And Miss Ines McGinnis, are you available? Gilchrist, I'm sorry.
Quite all right. As we join us as panelists, there's just a little bit of a delay, so apologies there.
No worries.
And
I'd like to administer the oath concerning the sign posting on the property. Can you take that oath today?
actually, I would like to invite Mr. Mike McGill, who is the owner of the property, to accept that oath as he was the one to post the sign.
Okay.
Or rather, it might show up on the screen as Mary McGill. They're likely together.
Okay. You need to unmute yourself. There, oh, almost. You need to unmute still.
Okay, we're here.
Good. Good morning.
I wish we were here in person seeing you all. Anyway,
Okay.
Mary McGill and Mike McGill is here.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi there. I'd like to administer an oath concerning the sign posting on the property. Can you take that oath today?
Yes, I can.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
I so swear.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gilchrist, please proceed. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Next slide, please. I'll do my best to run through this quickly. Most of all of this information rather is in the original planning justification and the addendum report provided last week. Subject property has a total area of 72 hectares, is designated agricultural resource area in the LP. zoned agricultural as well as rural commercial special exception 56, and is also subject to a floodplain overlay associated with Stevens Creek at the south end of the property. Next slide, please. Here we see the proposed floodplain mapping, which now covers a significantly larger portion of the property than the current floodplain mapping shows. However, there are areas outside the floodplain with safe access to Phelan Road, Prince of Wales Drive, and Third Line Road for both the severed and retained lands. Next slide, please. The proposed consent would sever the property into two 36-hectare parcels, where the severed lands would be the new agricultural parcel, and the retained lands would contain the existing business with an area of farmland as well. So although the PPS does discourage lot creation in prime agricultural areas, it does permit lot creation for new agricultural uses. And the wording, of course, is provided that the lots are of a size appropriate for the type of agricultural use common in the area and sufficiently large to maintain flexibility for future changes in the type or size of agricultural operations. So the official plan language in section 9.1.3 policy 7 is very consistent with the PPS policy and clearly establishes the minimum size for a new agricultural use for the new lot and the retained lot to be no less than 36 hectares each. OP policy 7 directly implements PPS with respect to the creation of a lot for a new agricultural use. This policy has consideration for and is consistent with PPS policy in terms of being an appropriate size for the type of agricultural use common in the area, as well as maintaining flexibility for future changes. So furthermore, we're working with a new OP that was approved in November last year and would have been reviewed thoroughly by MMNH for consistency with PPS prior to their decision to approve it. The OP establishes the minimum required area of both the severed and retained lands to be 36 hectares. The surrounding area is comprised of a combination of residential properties and smaller lots, ranging from 0.2 hectares to 1.5 hectares, both with agricultural and rural zoning. The adjacent agricultural properties are primarily farmed for crops and range in size from 14 hectares to 62 hectares. Since the last hearing, a letter of support was submitted by Mr. Peter Eastman of Carson P Farms, indicating that he has farmed the subject property for the past 38 years and notes that he currently farms parcels in the area ranging from 20 hectares to 52 hectares. So Mr. Peter Eastman has a lot of experience in this area and is very supportive of this proposed consent. Again, the proposed severance would create two 36-hectare parcels, and again, adequate road frontage and developable areas outside the floodplain in full conformance with the OP and compliance with zoning bylaw requirements, including having a minimum of 90 meters frontage on public road, again, outside the floodplain to achieve safe access. And I note that RBCA has indicated that they have no objections to the proposed consent with respect to the proposed severed and retained lands having sufficient area outside the floodplain. And the existing business on the retained lands is intended to continue in compliance with the existing zoning. And it's anticipated that the severed lands would continue to be used for the growing of crops, either via continued lease with Mr. Eastman or through purchase by Mr. Eastman, who farms them now and is very active in the farming community in the area now. That concludes my presentation, but of course I'm available to answer any questions that panel members have. And of course, I'm also joined here today by the property owners in the event that there's any specific questions for them.
Thank you, Ms. Gilchrist. Before we go on to the planning department and their comments, I note that there are 5 conditions requested on this application. Are you familiar with all 5 of those?
Yes, we are familiar. I did have one comment with respect to the requested road widening conditions. though upon review, they are consistent with what is expected under OP policy in terms of the municipality's ability to take widenings. I would just note that Phelan Road, though a collector in the rural area, it's approximately at 1.5 kilometers, a section of 1.5 kilometers east of Prince of Wales, and it dead ends at the 416. So I don't see much of a benefit from taking that widening, but I leave it to the panel's discretion.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to ask or comment that the conservation partners do not object to this application, and I'd like to ask conservation partners for their comment at this time.
Hi, through the chair. Yes, the Conservation Authority has reviewed the application. It is noted that the property is regulated. There's watercourses on the property as well as the floodplain along the southern half of the property. Specifically, as Ms. Gilchrist had presented, that this area is under the Stevens Creek floodplain mapping study area and is anticipated to be reviewed. And the floodplain mapping on this property is expected to increase significantly. But with the mapping and where it stands, the Conservation Authority is comfortable that the lots as proposed would have sufficient area on either parcel for future development. So there is no concerns from our end regarding the severance. So as indicated, there's no objections from the RVCA.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to ask planning for their comments. Mr. Harrigan, are you available?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department does object to this application as we feel that the PPS has not been satisfied. So the provincial policy statement does provide direction that we are to protect prime agricultural farmlands for the long term. And in that, they do highly discourage lot creation, and they only permit it for 4 circumstances. One of them being a new farm holding. And the new farm holding does state that they are of a size appropriate for the type of agriculture in this area, and that they are sufficiently large to maintain flexibility for future changes in the type or size of agriculture. We have heard additional comments about the surrounding area and the lots there, but there has been no discussion about accommodating future changes or maintaining flexibility for future changes in agricultural practices. We've heard the applicant state that the existing farmer is satisfied that the lot size will continue its current practice, is sufficient to continue the current practice, but that is absolutely not what the PPS says. In protecting it for the long-term use of agricultural lands, it needs to maintain flexibility for future changes, and there has been absolutely no discussion on there other than to say it's 36 hectares and it's fine, which is not what the policy requires in this case. The official plan does state that no less than 36 hectares is required for the minimum lot size in there, but is understood that it may require more for this potential changes or flexibility for future changes in agricultural practices, especially when the lot is heavily constrained by a floodplain, which does potentially limit agricultural practices and highly limits anything to do with livestock is almost can't be constructed other than like a small hobby farm at that point, which does not maintain flexibility at all. The department's position is, it's not to say that this is impossible to do a lot creation. It's just at this point, there has been absolutely no discussion that the sizes maintain flexibility for future changes. And that is directly from the PPS as a requirement. There's just been no discussion from the department's perspective.
Thank you. Ms. Gilchrist, any comments?
I think in response to that, there has been discussion within the initial planning justification letter in terms of what agricultural uses are common in the area, and that is crops primarily. And secondly, there was discussion provided in terms of what other permitted uses within the agricultural zone could theoretically be accommodated on the property. And for the purposes of demonstrating a livestock facility, MDS guidelines, typically MDS2 is not an exercise to work backwards from. It requires very specific information about a specific proposal to be done accurately and properly. But I would also say that given the constraints in the area today with respect to the amount of residential development that there is now, the change to the floodplain limit, this property is not suitable for livestock facility or something of that nature as it stands today, regardless of the consent application before you, and that this particular consent would allow the agricultural use to be protected by continuing the crop use by the existing lessee, potential purchaser, as a way to consolidate with other farming operations in the area. And that is the intent here. The Strathmere Inn, the owners are not farmers. They know that. They've leased this property for the past 38 years and are looking for ways to safeguard that and to ensure the long-term use of the large property for agricultural use.
Thank you. Any further comments, Mr. Herring?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to address a few comments there. The first was about existing discussion within the planning rationale. There was 2 sentences that spoke to future changes, and there's simple statements with no discussions. One of them just says the minimum 36 hectare size ensures a new farm holding and retain parcel, continue the existing business, and are sufficiently sized to maintain flexibility. Other than that statement, there's nothing else there. There's no discussion that the 36 hectares is actually sufficient for the minimum size. They do note in the second sentence again that the minimum size would permit all of the uses within the AG zone. But again, there's no discussion about these future changes and maintaining flexibility. And then the addendum that was sent the week after the first hearing, it actually provides just additional justification why it's constrained and doesn't maintain flexibility. Noting again, MDS is generally not worked backwards with, but in this case, it is appropriate to have an understanding about the capacity of a livestock, especially when talking about maintaining future changes or maintaining flexibility for future changes. And the applicant demonstrated there really is no opportunity for livestock. And again, that is only one of the agricultural practices, but then the comment about existing residential dwellings also limit the size. And really what they provided us is working against what the PPS requires, and that's maintain future flexibility. They've clearly demonstrated the size works for continuing the current practice, but that is absolutely not what we're talking about here. We're talking about maintaining flexibility for future changes for the long term, because that is how we protect our agricultural lands under the PPS.
Thank you. Now, can you respond to Mrs. Gilchrist's comment with respect to the road widening? Are you able to be a little more flexible on that dead end road?
Unfortunately not. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department is firm on the road widening requirements, as is the legal department in this. For this one, once the road classification has been identified, we do maintain the right-of-way protections required. Noting that again, the 26 meters right-of-way protection does allow for enhancements, whether that's widening or just repaving, adding in new drainage ditches, any type of that maintenance or upgrading that isn't just expanding the road. We do need that full right-of-way protection. So we would be firm on that request.
Thank you. I'd now like to go to the panel and ask them for their comments, questions, or concerns. Mr. Chandler.
This application is a little bit baffling to me. If I take the 2 sort of main sticking issues here, which I would suggest are probably protection of agricultural land and maybe concern about floodplain constraints. If I look at this from a very pragmatic and intent-based perspective, agriculture happens in floodplains. That's actually really one of the most appropriate uses. That's where we get good agricultural land, and I'm pretty sure that other members of this panel could speak more fully to that. So the floodplain to me is not even relevant to this application particularly. But I do have a question for the applicant's agent. In a perfect world, if the policies weren't what they are, would severing just Strathmere and putting the agricultural land in one big parcel to prevent agricultural land fragmentation and make it more appealing to a bona fide farmer to buy, wouldn't that be like best case scenario given what they're trying to accomplish?
Ms. Gilchrist.
If I may, yes, through you, Mr. Chair, Ms. Chandler, I have been working with Mary and Mike McGill for the better part of a year on how to file this application. And we have had extensive discussions about exactly that. And I have combed every single policy and looked at it from every angle, because in practice, for the purposes of maintaining the long-term protection of the agricultural use of the land, yes, in an ideal world, we would keep the agricultural parcel separate from the business parcel. And that's where the severance line would be. But under the policy framework, that is not possible here. And so what is before you today is working within that policy framework, where the OP very clearly outlines 36 hectares is the minimum for severed and retained. And we've tried to delineate that severance line the best we can, given, yes, less of a concern, the constraints of the parcel, but generally the full parcel is crops, is fields, but trying to separate the two parcels in a logical way, following the break lines in the fields.
Okay, so my comment is, this application frustrates me immensely. I think there's a far better solution here that would meet the PPS concerns with respect to long-term protection and fragmentation of farm agricultural land. But given that the applicant has not received support to do that, even through a intent-based approach within the OP, I don't have any concerns with moving with this application, because I think you guys are cornered and doing the best that you can. But it's sure not a best case scenario. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Revort, do you have any comments or questions?
I agree with Ms. Chandler's comments, and I also agree in the specific instance of this case. I agree with Ms. Gilchrist's position that the OP has recently been approved. The province has seen fit that a 36 hectare parcel is a reasonable size to promote agricultural activities. There are many agricultural uses outside of having cattle or livestock, and I think given the specific circumstances of this case, I'm in favor of the applications.
Thank you. Mr. Otto.
I guess I have some concerns with this application, as Ms. Chandler has stated. I guess my main concern is the retained portion, the way it's being carved up, or pardon me, the severed portion. I guess the way it's being carved up all along the Third Line Road, that would be, I'm positive eventually someday that's going to end up in houses. So that makes me leery of this, and I really do think that it should be left as one big parcel. However, Stuart Eastman, I believe you said, or Peter Eastman is going to farm all of the land, basically, both portions, retained and severed, if this goes through. Could you clarify that for me, please?
Ms. Gilchrist.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's an excellent question. So I am certain that the intent is for Mr. Eastman to either purchase or continue to lease the severed land portion. But for the portion on the retained land, so there's still, a fairly large portion of the fields within the retained lands. May I ask Mary and Mike if there is an intent there to continue to lease to Mr. Eastman for the portion on your retained lands by the business?
Yes, he will continue. We have already an agreement with him for the 150 acres, which we've had for 38 years or more. He will continue to do that. We are not farmers. We still need someone to farm the land.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Otto?
Okay, in that case, I guess the applicant is stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I'm satisfied with the answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, just a quick question. I think this is what rules and regulations do more harm than good. What would the sizes be in the perfect world? 36 and 36. What would that change to if you did the business? I think we might have seen that before, but could you just remind me what that would be, those two numbers?
I can answer that, Tess.
I was just trying to do the math in my head, Mary. Please
We
go ahead.
have, the business sits on 25 acres of rural commercial, which still gives us plenty of room. We grow our own food for our guests. We have beautiful gardens, and we do it all on that 25 acres, and Peter Eastman farms everything else in crops.
So the farm land would have been roughly 45 acres or hectares or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Well, I would rather have it that way too. However, I will support the application, but you know, Mr. Harrigan talks about future and everything and one thing and another, but you know, unfortunately, Mr. Eastman won't probably be here forever, and it's not to say what can happen the property in the future. It would have made it more, you know, stayed farming more so forever if it had been in the bigger chunk. However, I will support the application the way it is.
Thank you,
Can we go through with the bigger chunk application? Because it's we would prefer to keep the land as 150 acre piece. If we can do that, we will go back and take the time to make that change to our application if we thought we would get support. Absolutely. It's what we want.
Mr. Harrigan, is that possible?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it doesn't align with the PPS policies, which was the original concern with when we were discussing this property. So the department's position would remain the same. So it would be up to the committee to make the decision on that one.
So if I may, we're already in trouble, so we wouldn't be in a whole lot more trouble. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, yes.
Ms. Chandler, yes.
How big a rush is the applicant in?
Ms. Gilchrist?
That's really a question for Mary and Mike. I'm just here to support them.
Okay.
If you give me, if it meant giving us what we wanted in the beginning and to be able to separate our business of 40 years that we employ 100 rural staff. If it was within, I don't know how long it would take. We're not in a hurry if it means getting the end result, but I have no idea what kind of time frame it takes the city. So
I'm going to just put a thought out. I'm not sure. I think it would be worth asking the coordinator if this would need to be recirculated, if that adjustment was made. I think also that it would be important for the applicants to understand that there is always the risk that the city would appeal an application, because if we decided to approve it amended as we've discussed, it's further perhaps from their policies. And I know that Mr. Harrigan is uncomfortable with that. But really, in terms of protecting, I think everybody seems to agree, in terms of protecting long-term agricultural land use, this committee seems to unanimously prefer to see that parcel as large as possible. So my suggestion today, given those outstanding questions, is you may wish to adjourn this application at least for 2 weeks and see if you can sort something further.
I think that's a wonderful suggestion. What do you think, Ms. Gilchrist and Ms. McGill?
If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, hearing the feedback today is extremely validating in terms of the discussions that we have had to date between myself and the owners. And I just want to note that as a planner, these situations are extremely tricky when we're working with a very clear policy framework where the application doesn't meet the intent in this particular circumstance. And so I would be supportive of revising the application, changing the severance line to separate the business and having the severed lands be a much larger agricultural property. I am somewhat concerned, however, as you've noted, Member Chandler, that staff are not supportive of this proposed severance, which in my opinion meets the policy direction. So if we do adjourn and come back with what we're all talking about right now, and I appreciate that we can't necessarily have, the complete confidence to proceed in that direction. But I guess I'm just looking to the panel members for, and thank you, Ms. Chandler, for your input on this, just whether or not that's something that we should do to the other panel members as well, adjourn for 2 weeks and come back.
Mr. Lewis, would you be in favor of that?
Well, I guess I will, we're in trouble now. How much more trouble will we be in? But it's the right thing to do, is to change those boundaries. There's right and wrong. And that's why we are here as a committee, to decide things that don't really fit the rule book. So I'm in support of that.
Mr. Vervoort?
I think that makes sense too. And I guess the question would be if there's any flexibility on the part of planning to try and improve the situation and address some of the concerns that Mr. Harrigan has. I think the unique part of this application too is the split zoning that we have on the property and the existing use that has been there for many years. So I think it never hurts to talk and try and come up with a better solution. So if everybody's in agreement and we can put this off for a couple of weeks, that makes sense to me.
Okay, Mr. Otto?
I agree 100% of what's been said so far, and I would encourage to have some fruitful discussions in the next 2 weeks and come back so we can save this large chunk of agricultural land for agricultural purposes and move on.
Thank you. I too agree. I think there's an opportunity here for the next 2 weeks to either bring this back, this application as it is today, or have it consolidated as you're looking for the two parcels together. And I hope Mr. Harrigan and the planning department can make that work for the McGills, and knowing that this is what we would like to see have happen too. So to that end, I'd like to ask yes, Ms. Chandler.
Sorry, I think you haven't heard enough from me, but I do want to say that professional planners have to make decisions that are right. And they have to consider intent. And I do not really understand how the city's planning department, this is not at you, Mr. Harrigan, I just mean in general, because I know that you guys talk about this stuff and you must have to vet everything, like get out of the opinions of other professional planners. Like that's the way planning works. It's subjective, is to really go back, and it's okay to say that something doesn't meet the policy, but it's also okay to provide an opinion from my perspective when something is also right. And anyways, I would encourage the city's planning department to have a think about how to address this in a way that really meets the intent of what the official plan policy wants to see, and the province. And you may disagree with the position that the committee has on this, but I hope that there is some fruitful discussion will come of it, because I really think we're all trying to achieve the same thing here.
Yeah. Mr. Harrigan, you have some comment?
Thank you. I just wanted to make one comment for the panel's benefit. Shrinking the size down does change the classification of severance. So right now they are applying for a new farm holding. Shrinking it down and separating the commercial business from the farmland falls under an agricultural related severance, which does have its own policies to that and its own criteria. So we would still have to raise an objection with that one as well too. I am happy to discuss with my colleagues through the policy and the intent of the PPS, but ultimately, as Mr. Lewis had mentioned, we would have concerns with this application now, and with the revised application, we would still be expressing significant concerns. But at this point, it is creating a new parcel permanently and just having that consideration. Again, what we're all looking to do, that long-term protection of agricultural lands.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harrigan. So to that end, I'd like to ask the panel to adjourn this application for 2 weeks and to the next our hearing date, which is April the 19th. Are you okay with that, Ms. Gilchrist?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So all those in favor, please raise your hands. Sorry, Ms. McGill, you wanted to say something? Your hand is raised. No? Okay. So we've adjourned this application.
Sorry, I unmuted. I'm sorry. I'm having
Okay.
trouble with the unmute.
That's
I
okay.
wanted to say thank you so much to the panel. you've restored my faith in the city because you're absolutely, it's exactly what I'm hoping for. And I just want to thank you for raising it and hoping we can do something with the farm.
You're welcome, Ms. McGill. So to that end, we've adjourned this application till April the 19th. See you then, Ms. Gilchrist. Ms. McGill.
Thank you.
I'm now going to excuse myself so that the panel can hear the application number 2, and I'm turning over the chair to Ms. Chandler. Thank you very much.
Okay, as though everybody hasn't heard enough from me today. This is item number 2, 137, 141, and 147 Salisbury Street, B00061 through to 63. And we are looking to speak to Mr. D. Fernandez.
Hello.
Hello, I have D. Fernandez as the agent.
Yeah, that's my boss. I'm an associate at this firm representing the applicant.
Could you give me your name and address for the record, please?
Yeah, my first name is Deneen. My last name Whiting. And our address is 418 Preston Street.
Whiting spelled W-H-I-T-I-N-G?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, we need an oath regarding the sign posting.
Yeah, I can provide that.
I can't read it to you. 1 second. My apologies.
Okay.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
Yes, I affirm.
Okay. Now we have had an opportunity to look at this application. There are no objections from the Conservation Authority, and it appears there are no concerns from planning. One condition is proposed. Are you aware of that condition?
Yes.
Okay, and it relates to written confirmation that the existing notices remain on title.
Yeah.
Okay. Does the planning department have anything that they would like to add?
Through you, Ms. Chair, we have no additional comments or concerns with this application here.
Okay, super. There were no concerns by the conservation partners. So anything further from the panel before we make a decision on this application? Mr. Otto?
No questions or concerns. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Lewis?
No, I'm fine.
Mr. Vervoort?
Just had a quick question for the applicant regarding, I see that we've got a registered reference plan already showing the proposed lot lines. Just a question about, are there party wall agreements or joint use and maintenance agreements related to this that have to be registered?
There are already there is already one registered on title that will refer to the revised reference plan with where it has the houses sectioned out.
Okay, so that's all been covered off already.
Yeah, and it will fulfill, like, they'll remain on title with the new condition.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I have no concerns with the applications.
Okay, I think we're good then. Those in favor of granting this consent with the noted condition? All right, and your application is granted.
Thank you.
And that is all for today's hearing. Thank you very much, everyone.